Good morning, everybody. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Welcome to our virtual classroom for National Science Week. My name is Alex, and I'm from an organisation with a vision of our oceans full of life. Today, we're going to learn about how science is helping us to protect life in our ocean. Guiding us through the lesson, we're joined by Ocean Ambassador Nicola, teacher Mark Dunn, environmentalist Laura Wells, and shark expert Dr Adrian Gutteridge. Alexis will then explain about how you could win a prize for your school. Thank you for joining us today. And before we get started, I'd like to welcome Nicola to say a few words about our ocean.
Welcome, young leaders of the future. I hope you are all incredibly well and enjoy what these virtual sessions have in store for you. To introduce myself, I'm Nicola. I'm 18 from Victoria, Australia, and I am totally obsessed with the ocean. I'm currently studying my first year of marine science at university, and I have to say it is awesome. Spending time in the ocean, learning new and better ways to do things to protect our big blue, and connecting with incredible, passionate, like-minded people is what I love to do. As young people in this new era of advanced technology, sometimes we forget to connect with what's around us. And without connection to people and to nature especially, we can forget to appreciate it for what it is. Sometimes we forget that we're a part of nature too. Learning about the ocean at your age is incredibly important. One of my favorite things I've learned about our oceans is that they supply us with around 70% of the air we breathe. Incredible, right? But that's it. The ocean is so incredible. And as the young people that you are, understanding just how important and how much we all rely on this magical and abundant place is so significant. Because without healthy and thriving oceans full of marine life that you know and don't, none of us would be here. When I was little, around 6 or 7, I had the opportunity to go snorkeling, and on that day I saw the most beautiful green sea turtle. And from then on, I was inspired to learn more about our ocean, to learn more about how I could conserve and protect them. This passion and love I have for the ocean fuels everything I do. I'm an ambassador for our oceans, you could say, but I like to think of it that we are all ambassadors. We are all representing our planet and the oceans that we want, and paving the way and shedding light on the ocean and the earth that we want for the future. So enjoy these sessions today, and I hope you learn so much about the ocean and just how much we all depend on them.
Thank you so much, Nicola, for your inspiring words. I now hand you over to Mr. Dunn, who will guide you through this lesson.
Good morning, everybody. It's really good to have you all here for our lesson today. And welcome to National Science Week. So let us begin. So what I'd like to say is really important, just so that we get the most out of this lesson, is that you mute your microphones and you make sure that you stay on mute throughout. Also, can you make sure that your camera is turned off? It's really important that your camera is turned off during the lesson. So if it isn't, just make sure you can just click off that now. Also, we're going to be using some interactive questioning tools today. One of them is called menti.com. So can you please go to menti.com and can you enter the code 898325 So that's 898325. And we really would love people to ask questions through the chat box. So make sure that you just ask those questions through that chat box so we can see them and we can try and answer them. And the most important thing here is to enjoy it. So we're going to learn a lot about the ocean today. We're going to learn some new concepts that you might not have heard of before, but mainly it's all about enjoying it at the start of National Science Week. So by the end of the lesson today, we're going to know about, or know a little bit more about the ocean, sustainability, food webs, bycatch, overfishing, marine ecosystems, and fisheries. Now, there may be some words there that you have heard before, but you're not sure what they are. You may know a lot of them, or you may not know any of them. But by the end of this lesson, you're going to know a little bit more about all of these things and how these things connect to the ocean. So what things do we associate, do we think of when we think of the ocean? So have a look at that picture there that you can see. And hopefully that picture will help you to think of a few things that you think of when you see or think of the ocean. So you can close your eyes, you can just think with your eyes open, just at your desk or wherever you're at. Just spend 10 seconds having to think about what you think about when you see the word ocean. So there are lots of things that we might think about, and I'm going to put some pictures up to help jog our memory. So we could think of animals like sharks. So sharks sometimes have a bad reputation, but they're got a really important role in the marine ecosystem in the ocean. We'll talk about that later. Maybe you think of fishers, so people that fish in the ocean. You may think of other types of animals like octopus, even lobster. You may think of the beach, so you may think of things that aren't in the ocean but are next to the ocean sometimes. So a shell, fishing boats, prawns, wonderful tasty food from the ocean, fishing nets, so that's connected to fishing boats, the beach, so some of you may go on holiday to the beach, and also things that maybe have water next to them, so like a harbour, like Sydney Harbour. Food is a very important thing that we get from the ocean. Snorkeling, leisure activity, and coral. So there's lots of different things that we think of when we see the word ocean or we see a picture of the ocean. And today we're going to talk a little bit about how all those things are connected to each other and how it's really important that we make sure that the ocean is teeming with life, it's full of life for as long as possible. So some of the things that we were just talking about, the things that like people that work on the ocean, so fishers, so people work on the ocean, they have a job which involves the ocean. You get food from the ocean. Some people play sport on or in the ocean and they use it for their hobbies, like they snorkel or they windsurf or they sail. And some people enjoy to live by the ocean to get the clean and the fresh air and just enjoy anything that the ocean brings, the beach and other things like that. The big thing today is recognizing this connection that we have with the ocean and how to make sure that we can protect the species in the ocean so that it's full of life. So I think a few of you have already voted in this question, but if you haven't, just make sure you go to menti.com and use the code 898325 at the top of the screen to vote. So what would happen if we took too many of one type of animal, so species, from the ocean? What would happen if we took too many of them? I'm going to give you maybe 10 seconds to think about that. So you've already done this. Wow, I've got 225 responses so far. That's fantastic. 3 seconds. Amazing. So we have 98% of you think that some animals or some species in the ocean would die out. And that's absolutely correct. So we need to be very, very careful about the animals that we take from the ocean, but also the number of the animals that we take from the ocean, because we want to make sure that all of those fish and the other species that are in the ocean are there for a long time. We want to make sure that we're taking the right amount and we're taking the right animals. And we're going to talk about that in the lesson today. So some of you may have come across this in your science lessons. So this is called a food web. Now, as you can see in this food web, this is an ocean food web, so a marine ecosystem. And what happens is there's a predator, usually atop of the food web, who then feeds on other animals below in the food web. So in this example, you've got the whale that eats the seal, but the seal eats the fish. And the big fish may eat some of the smaller fish, and it may even eat some of the prawns. And that means that they're connected to each other. So the issue we have is that if some of these animals are taken, or too many of these animals are taken from the ocean, then the animals that feed on them may not actually be able to have food to feed on, and they may eventually not have enough food to live. And there are lots and lots of places in the world. The ocean covers a massive percentage of our planet. And there are lots and lots of places where, unfortunately, people do take too many of one type of fish, or they take other fish that they don't need to take. And one of these places where there's such a diverse marine ecosystem is Antarctica. Now, we actually have somebody here today who's going to talk to us about their expedition to Antarctica. So we have here with us today, Laura Wells. Laura Wells, I'm really excited to be joined by Laura Wells today. Is a presenter, a model, and an environmentalist. In 2018, Laura traveled to Antarctica for a project called Homeward Bound, which led the largest ever female expedition to Antarctica. So Laura is going to talk to us now about her experience and what she observed, so what she saw in Antarctica in terms of the effects of climate change on the continent, the penguins, the different animals that live there, and also how maybe some things that are happening there are impacting on the food chain and the food webs. And I'd like to hand you over to Laura Wells. So it's really good to hear from you, Laura. How are you today?
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. So in 2018, I went with 80 other female scientists from all around the world to learn about climate change and how to use my powers for good to protect the planet for the future. And Antarctica is an amazing place. The big white continent is the 5th largest continent on Earth with no permanent residents. So technically, no one's actually from Antarctica, but scientists do live there year round to study it, because even though Antarctica seems totally isolated at the bottom of the planet, it is actually connected to all of us, no matter where we live on Earth. Now, did you know that Antarctica, even though it is covered by ice, and in some places the ice is 4,000 meters deep, it is actually considered a desert? And that's because it is the driest continent on Earth. Very little snow or rain actually fall in Antarctica because it's so cold. The lowest recorded temperature in Antarctica was minus 89.2 degrees Celsius. So it kind of makes our winters here in Australia seem really warm, doesn't it? Antarctica contains up to about 90% of all ice on Earth and holds around 70% of Earth's fresh water. So it's a very, very interesting place. But even though Antarctica appears to be at the end of the Earth on our maps, it's actually at the center of the world's oceans. The strongest current in the world, the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, it runs clockwise around the continent. It drives the global conveyor belt that circulates water through our oceans. It's kind of like the beating heart that pumps our life through all of the oceans on Earth. And that current, it actually regulates the weather and processes around the entire planet. But global warming and climate change is shifting its behavior. And that means that not only is Antarctica affected by climate change, but so is the rest of the world and all of its oceans and people and weather and animals as well. So although Antarctica can appear to be a big white desert, the oceans are actually teeming with life. There are seabirds like albatross and skuas, penguins, whales, seals, lots of benthic creatures, so creatures that live on the ocean floor like crabs and worms. And then there's lots and lots of krill. Now, krill is the most abundant animal species in Antarctica, which means it's the species with the largest population. Antarctic krill are small prawn-like crustaceans, and there are around 400 trillion krill species swimming in the Southern Ocean. They are that keystone prey species, which means they're at the bottom of that food web that Mark was talking about before. So essentially, they feed all of the bigger animals in the Antarctic waters. So you can think of krill kind of like the engine that powers the Antarctic ecosystem, or like fuel that we put into a car to make it run. But I want to talk to you about penguins, because penguins are very, very cool with their little tuxedos and their funny walk. Penguins were one of my most favorite animals to watch while I was in Antarctica. And older penguins, they're equipped with waterproof layers of feathers, allowing them to move swiftly through the water and stay warm while they're on land. Their feathers are kind of like a human equivalent of a wetsuit. But by comparison, penguin chicks, with the babies, they're born with fluffy feathers, and they can't swim until they molt all of that fluff. Otherwise, they will probably sink. So this is an important thing to know, because as the climate in Antarctica is changing and warming up, Antarctica has actually had its warmest day in February this year. The ice will melt and more rain falls, and these juvenile penguins actually struggle to stay dry with all their fluff. They become wet and muddy, and they're unable to stay warm. And at night, they become particularly extremely vulnerable, because when the temperature drops and the wind picks up, if they're still not dry, wet penguins might not make it through the night. And while I was in Antarctica, I saw a lot of melted ice and pools of water, which was an example of climate change in action, happening right in front of my eyes. So this changing of climate and melting of ice means that populations of penguins are actually in decline. Species like the chinstrap penguin are actually losing around 50% of their populations. And if the weather keeps getting hotter, we might lose the species altogether. So although some species like the gentoo penguin, they're the ones with the cool little orange beaks and orange feet, they're adapting to climate change. So what they're doing is they're moving their colonies to places in Antarctica where there's less ice melt, and they're changing their diet. So what happens with climate change and penguins? It's a very delicate balance of adaptations and how well an animal can survive or change to beat the processes of climate change in Antarctica. Now, in the last 50 years, Antarctica has changed a lot, and the impacts, they're rippling up that food web. So they're having effects on all different species down there in Antarctica. And while several factors have a role to play in this, we have evidence that climate change is really the driving force and is responsible for a lot of the changes we're seeing in Antarctica. So studying Antarctica is very, very difficult. Obviously, it's really cold and it's a long way away, but by studying in Antarctica, it really holds the key for understanding the future of our planet. So studying penguins, it can teach us about their environment. And if you quantify or count how many penguins there are, then that will help you to quantify and count how many krill there are. And remember, krill is that fuel of our ocean. So for a healthy ocean, we must not only protect the big, fun, cute looking species like penguins and seals and whales, but we also need to protect the krill populations as well. And that's where science meets fishing, because the studies we do on penguins and krill help us to know how much krill we can take out of our oceans safely without hurting any other species. And this is known as fisheries, and that's what you're going to learn all about next. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Laura. That was great to hear all about your expedition in Antarctica. And I think I learned a few new things there as well. So thank you very much. And Laura mentioned about the krill fishery and how the krill was almost like the foundation, the bedrock of the marine ecosystem in Antarctica, and also in lots of other places all around the world. And what I think we need to learn about is what a fishery actually is. So, if you look at the image on the screen, we can see a circle with lots of boats inside it, okay? So a fishery is an area of the ocean where it could be a few boats or lots of boats, fish for a specific type or species of an ocean life. So for example, these boats that you see in our circle on the screen, they're in their fishery, and they could be fishing for something like tuna. So tuna is a lovely, lovely, tasty fish that we have. You can get it canned, you can get it fresh, you can have tuna sandwiches, and it's a lovely, lovely piece of food. And in this particular fishery that we're looking at now, in the picture, they could be fishing in that part of the ocean, could be hundreds of miles wide for tuna. But in a fishery, sometimes there could be lots and lots of boats in that fishery, in that area of the ocean, and they can actually be taking too many tuna, or they might even accidentally take other fish or other marine species from the ocean. And that can impact, that can have an effect on the food web that we looked at earlier on, and we're going to come back to that. So one of the things that happens sometimes, and we need to try and prevent it, is something called bycatch. So we're going to have a little look at a video now, and it's going to tell us a little bit about what bycatch is and how it affects the food web, how it affects the marine ecosystem in a fishery.
Another problem is bycatch. Bycatch is when fishing boats accidentally catch fish and animals that they don't really want or shouldn't take. It can be other species of marine life, like seabirds and other marine creatures like sharks and turtles. Bycatch can also include young or undersized fish that are not really big enough to eat, so should be left in the sea to grow.
Okay, so when we just looked at that video, one of the things I want us to focus on here is the net. And when the boats in the fishery cast their nets into the ocean and they're looking for tuna, so you're going to imagine that all those little fish are tuna. Tuna are actually a little bit bigger than that, but we're going to imagine they're tuna. And what happens is that sometimes when they pull their net up out of the ocean, they actually catch other marine animals in the net. And when they're catching other animals that aren't the species, the type of animal that they actually are looking for in their fishery, so the tuna, this is what we call bycatch. So in this picture, we can actually see that there's two different marine animals here that they've caught in their net. They've caught a turtle and they've also caught a shark. Now, they didn't want to catch those. That's not what they were fishing for. So we call that bycatch. So it's something that they don't need. They shouldn't be taken from the ocean, okay? And that causes a problem because if they take too many of those, they get too many, if bycatch happens too often, if the bycatch happens too often, then what happens is it affects the food webs that we were talking about earlier on. And we're going to watch another little video now. And we're going to think a little bit about what will happen if we don't try and stop this bycatch, because it can be a big problem and it can affect a lot of things.
All sea life is connected in a food web of prey and predator, each relying on the other to survive. If predators such as cod, seals, sharks and dolphins lose one of their main sources of food, then they too will begin to disappear.
So, as you can see from that image there, that the knock-on effect of taking too much of one animal, or even taking the wrong animal when you're fishing in your fishery, can be quite devastating to the ocean. And I'm going to try and demonstrate that for you here. So, if you're taking lots of smaller fish from the ocean, and things like squid, which is above the cross here, you're taking lots of the smaller fish, and the squid are eating the smaller fish. That's what they feed on every single day. If they don't have enough of those fish to eat, potentially what's going to happen is the squid will not have food to eat because the other smaller fish won't be around. They won't be plentiful. There won't be enough for them to eat. So the squid, or the animals above them in the food web, like the penguin and the prawn, the shrimp, they will actually potentially, they could die out. They could become extinct because they won't have enough food to eat. And that's a real big problem because we want to keep our oceans teeming with life. We want to have lots of life in them, not just because we eat some of the food from the ocean, but because we want to encourage what we call biodiversity in the ocean. We want lots of animals to live there. We want our children and our children's children. We want them to know these animals, know what penguins are, and know what whales are and seals. We don't want them to die out. And that's a big, big problem. Some of these marine animals can eventually be endangered and become extinct. And let's just think about that for a second. Think about the impact of that on lots of different things, on the people that work in the ocean, on the animals in the ocean, on the food that we eat. So the food that we eat from the ocean, fish, is a huge part of our diet. It's one of the biggest sources of protein in the world. I've got some questions now for you. So we've learned a little bit about bycatch, and we've just talked about another concept, which is overfishing. So overfishing is when we take too many of a certain type of fish. So in the fishery that we talked about, imagine that they took lots and lots of the same fish, the tuna, but they just took too many of them. And they took lots of the young fish. They take lots of the young fish. The impact of that is that they won't be able to reproduce and make more tuna, have more baby tuna. It will grow up, and then they'll have more baby tuna. And if we keep taking too many of the smaller fish, the smaller tuna, the younger tuna, what will happen is there won't be enough tuna left in the ocean. So let's look at these questions. So on Mentimeter, can you please go onto menti.com and can you use the code 898325? And can you try, if possible, and answer these questions? So you have to choose one of them. So how can we prevent bycatch and overfishing? So how do we just leave the younger fish in the ocean to grow and reproduce? Do we use special fishing nets that only catch the fish you're looking for? Do we only take the fish that you need from the ocean? Do we fish at certain times of the day to catch certain species of fish? Or can we do all of those things? And will all of those things prevent bycatch and overfishing? So have a think about that. Is it all of them, or is it one specific one? I'm going to give you 15 seconds. Well, I can see here we've got quite a lot of people thinking all answers are correct. 5 more seconds. 2 and 1. So if you're still going, that's absolutely fine. We've got 264 responses, which is absolutely fantastic. And actually 46% of you, which is a big portion of you, think all the answers are correct. And 46% of you are correct, because all of those answers, all of those things will help us prevent bycatch, so take in fish that we don't need, that we're not targeting. And also it will help prevent overfishing. So together, if we leave the younger fish in the ocean, if we use special fishing nets that only catch the fish you're looking for, if we only take the amount of fish that we need, and we fish at certain times of the day, because certain fish actually feed at different times of the day in different depths of the ocean. So if we're fishing at nighttime, and we know tuna feed at nighttime at the surface of the ocean, then it might be a good idea to fish at that time for tuna. Because if you fish during the day, we might get other fish in our nets, and that could be bycatch, and we don't want that. So one of the things that I want to talk to you about here is the idea of how all of those things make sure we're sustainably fishing. So the idea of sustainably fishing is that we're not taking too many fish from the ocean so that eventually the fish would not be in the ocean anymore. And that we are not taking, or we're not having bycatch in our nets so that the marine ecosystem, the food web, can be intact so it can stay healthy. Sustainable fishing means leaving enough fish in the ocean it's on your screen for you. Respecting the habitats, so the parts of the ocean where they live and breed, and ensuring people like fishers who depend on fishing can maintain their livelihoods. So we're making sure that it's not only just what's in the ocean, but the people on land who depend on that, the humans that are eating the fish and that are fishing for the fish. So this is a bit of a true or false section again. Okay, so we need to go on menti.com. You're using this really well. Everyone's doing so well with this. So if you're on menti.com, the code again is 898325 at the top of the screen. And this is the true or false. So have a go at voting. Are we fishing sustainably if we keep taking bycatch from the ocean? So menti.com. Let's see if we can have a go. So vote for me. Are we fishing sustainably if we keep taking bycatch from the ocean? Just bear with us, we're having a little bit of a technical issue. So if you can go to menti.com, let's see if this works. So I think so hold on a second. So I think if we think about this and we think about if we think about bycatch again, one of the biggest things is if we're taking too many fish from the ocean, then we're not going to be able to make sure that we have enough fish to eat. Let's try another question. So I think the other questions are. So another question that you can consider is, are we fishing sustainably if we use specialized nets for the fish that we want to catch so the younger fish can go back into the ocean? So we're on this slide now, it's brilliant. So are we fishing sustainably if we use specialized nets for the fish we want to catch so the younger fish can go back into the ocean? And the answer is true. Yes, that is correct. Because if we use specialized nets, and the younger fish can swim out and they can stay in the ocean, and that means that they can reproduce and have more, for example, the tuna can have more baby tuna can grow to adulthood, and then we can take them from the ocean and we can use them as protein and we can eat them. So that's true. 318 people, 81% of you got that correct, which is fantastic. Next question. So the next question that we have, just give us a second, I have a few issues here with the technical side of things, is, are we fishing sustainably if we have too many boats in a fishery and we're taking too many of the same species of fish? So are we fishing sustainably if we have too many boats in a fishery taking too many of the same species of fish? Give you 10 more seconds for that. 10 more seconds. Okay, so the answer to that question is false. So we're taking too many, if we have too many boats in a fishery, we're taking too many of the same species of fish, and what happens is we don't have enough of them left to reproduce. And again, false. So the answer to that thought is false. So 197 of you voted and 88% of you got that correct, which is fantastic. The next question is, are we fishing sustainably if we take lots of sharks, for example, from the ocean and disrupt the food web. So let's vote on that one. Menti.com, 898325. Are we fishing sustainably if we take lots of sharks from the ocean and disrupt the food web? Are we fishing sustainably if we take too many sharks? In 10 more seconds. Think about this. Okay, so sharks, we're taking too many of them. Think about what might happen to the food web if we take too many sharks. So sharks are one of the predators in the ocean, so they're at the top of the food web. Let's have a think. Where have you voted for this one? I think we're having a few problems with this one. So the answer is false. So 88% of you they got that correct. So it is false. Because if we take too many sharks from the ocean, then the food web itself becomes disrupted. So then we're not fishing sustainably. Because if we want to fish sustainably, then we need to make sure we're keeping enough sharks in the ocean because they are a vital part of the food web. So thank you very much. So at the beginning, we spoke about the key concepts that we'll be learning about today. And we'll be learning about the ocean as a whole, sustainability, food webs, bycatch, what overfishing is, marine ecosystems, and fisheries. So we've touched on all of those things today. What's really important that I'd like you to take away from this is that everything is connected to each other. The ocean is connected to us, and everything in the ocean is connected to each other. And we've got to make sure that we keep the ocean full of life so that not only our life isn't impacted, but also that those animals can be in the ocean for hundreds and thousands of years more, and that we can enjoy seeing them. We can enjoy, in some instances, eating some of those animals for protein, and that we can make sure that we're sustainably fishing in our oceans to keep those oceans teeming with life. So we have our resident shark expert in with us today. Now, Dr. Adrian Gutteridge is here to speak to us, and I know that some of you are going to ask some questions to Adrian, and Adrian is kindly here to speak to you and answer some of those questions. So, hello Adrian, welcome.
Yep, g'day, how you going?
I'm good, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. So we're just waiting for some questions here, Adrian. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what got you interested in sharks?
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, my kind of path to becoming a marine scientist and I guess ending up doing a PhD on sharks is sort of what Nicola was saying earlier. Yeah, I was pretty much like maybe a lot of people on this call. I was just a frothing little grommet hanging out at the beach a lot when I was young and flipping rocks at rock pools and loving surfing and fishing. And then from there, I ended up going to university and studying marine science. And yeah, one of the first trips I did to the Great Barrier Reef, we were all supposed to be kind of paying attention to fish and counting seagrass and stuff. And then a shark swam past me and I pretty much forgot everything else I was supposed to do at that time and followed this animal for about 10 minutes. And yeah, it was just an incredible thing. You hear all the stories about how they're dangerous and every shark is out there to get you, but this thing didn't care about us. And it was just an amazing, amazing experience. And then from there, I pretty much changed every subject I had so I could do fish and sharks. And yeah, the more I learned about it, the more I realized there wasn't actually all that much known about them. And then my research kicked off and I ended up in a place called Hervey Bay in Queensland. And yeah, did a PhD, catching and tagging and releasing a whole bunch of sharks. And I actually have a prop here, which isn't a shark, but this here, if you can see, this is the species I did most of my work on. It's a little whaler shark that's very closely related to bull sharks and tiger sharks, but it only ever gets to about 80 centimeters. And so I guess one of the things for me about sharks is that, you know, we hear about things like great whites and tiger sharks and stuff, but there's so many other species out there, and the diversity and, you know, I guess differences among species is, yeah, really vast, and they're just incredible animals, really. And that's pretty much, you know, a general background of my life up until now. And yeah, I'm very keen to answer as many questions as you guys have. So yeah, send them through and let's go from here.
Thank you, Adrian. So I think one of the questions we've got here now, which is fantastic. How long have sharks been around? That's one of the questions we've got from one of our viewers today. How long have sharks been around for?
Sharks have actually been around for an incredibly long time. Rough estimation is about 200 million years. So they're one of those, you know, evolutionary success stories where they really haven't changed much in that time. And 200 million years kind of puts them in the same, you know, evolutionary point of our not human history, of our planet's history with dinosaurs. So yeah, they're really one of those things that is an absolute relic in terms of how long they've been around for. But yeah, they really haven't changed that much. So they're just a huge success story and very well adapted to living in the ocean and being, yeah, top predators.
Thank you. And the second question we've got here is, how many species of sharks are there? And actually, I don't know the answer to this. I'd be interested too.
Yeah, so how many species of sharks are there? So there's actually, well, there's about 700-ish around the world, but sharks and rays are actually really closely related. They're called elasmobranchs, and that group of animals is different to bony fish in that they don't have scales, and they use different ways of, they don't have any bone in their body either, like lots of the fish we eat. And they actually, they're very slow to reproduce, and lots of them give birth to live young. So when it comes to species, when people talk about sharks and rays, that's why they're put together. And in Australia, we've got about 300 to 400 species of sharks and ray, and that's about half. So there's probably about 150 to 200 species of sharks in Australia, and probably more than half of those you don't get anywhere else in the world. So we have quite a diverse and abundant shark and ray, you know, populations in Australia, and that's actually quite a good thing. Sharks are one of the first species to leave when an area becomes overfished or you know, impacted. And so the fact that we do have lots of sharks and lots of different species in Australia is a good indication that our oceans are really healthy.
Fantastic. Well, I definitely learned something there as well. Another good question we've got here from somebody is, how many fish do sharks eat? So maybe the different types of fish that shark might eat, that might be something we can talk about.
Well, I can actually answer this in terms of this species, because this species is called a slit-eye shark, as I said, and I studied what it ate as part of my PhD, and it ate about 40 different things, from little fish like bream and whiting through to crabs and squid. It does depend on the species though. So you have animals like great white sharks that they eat, you know, lots of fish as well, but also things like seals. Then you have the biggest fish in the sea, which is the whale shark. And then the second biggest fish is a basking shark. They don't actually eat fish. They eat plankton. So they eat very similar things to whales. And then probably the most interesting shark in terms of what it eats is a tiger shark. So tiger sharks are one of the few species that eats almost everything it encounters. So it eats things like turtles. It eats terrestrial animals that wash into rivers. One of my friends did a study on tiger sharks in Queensland, and one of the animals that she dissected and looked at its stomach contents, it had a fruit bat and a rainbow lorikeet in its stomach. And so they pretty much eat whatever comes past them. And other scientists doing dietary studies of tiger sharks have found things like number plates and you know, car parts and things that fall off ships. So yeah, depends on the species, but the overall answer to how many fish do sharks eat is a lot. most shark species do eat fish, and so that's probably the key part of their diet.
Fantastic. Well, those tiger sharks certainly do eat anything by the sounds of it. Next question then for you, Adrian, is what is the biggest shark? Biggest one. I think you might have touched about it there.
Yeah, the biggest shark's a whale shark. So they live to be about 15 plus meters. So if lots of people on this call caught a bus to school today, then a whale shark gets as big as that bus. The second biggest shark in the world is a basking shark, and they both eat plankton, as I said. The smallest shark in the world is something called a pygmy lanternfish, and they get about 20 centimeters, is as big as they ever get. And they're a deep water species that actually grows pretty slowly. But the biggest shark ever is what is referred to as megalodon. So its species name is Carcharodonus megalodon, and it is very closely related to what we still have in the world as great white sharks. But they got to about 20 meters, and they hunted whales and ate whales. And that's pretty much, I think, the coolest animal that's ever existed, just personally. And I'm sort of glad they don't live today, because that would make surfing and diving a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah, it would, especially being so big as well. I've got a good question here as well about smelling blood from sharks. So how far away can sharks smell blood? So I think there might be a few myths going around about this. So it'd be quite interesting to know, how far can a shark smell blood in the ocean?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't actually know the answer to that one. Maybe that's something I should find out myself. But I know people who study their sensory biology. So sensory biology is the study of something's like smell and how they can hear and how they can see. And I know from some of those sharks, as they've tried to work out how far away sharks can smell bait. And the common thought is that it would be within about like a couple of 100 meters. So within a couple of 100 meters of a big bait going in the water, any shark in that environment will pick that up. I don't think it's upwards of the kind of 5 to 10 kilometer range that I've heard said before. Sharks do have quite an incredible, sensory biology network. So they have the ability to sense electromagnetic pulses through their head, and things like hammerhead sharks, for example, they are pretty much a swimming metal detector. So they will use their head to swim along in sandy areas and find buried fish like stingrays and flathead. But yeah, I'm not actually sure what the definitive answer for how far away sharks can smell blood, but I don't think it's as far as what is commonly put out there in terms of kilometers. I think it'd be much less than that.
Yeah, I thought so too. So, and when I was young, people would say it was 30 kilometers, and that's quite scary sometimes, especially if you catch yourself on a rock in the ocean, especially in Australia. Yep. Another question is, this is quite a general question, but what is a shark? So maybe what's the definition of a shark? What makes a shark a shark? Okay,
so a shark. So I touched on this before. So this is what is sharks and rays. They're very closely related. So what makes a shark, and what makes them different to rays? So, let's start with normal fish. So a normal fish like a snapper or a brim or a whiting that you might know, or a tuna, they all have scales. Sharks don't have scales. They have modified skin. And if anyone remembers the early Olympics from the 2000s, all the swimmers that used to wear full body suits when they were swimming actually had that modeled off shark skin. Because if you rub your hand from the nose of a shark to the tail, it's very smooth. But if you rub your hand the other way, it feels like sandpaper. That actually gives them, good hydrodynamics. Sharks also regulate their buoyancy with a big fat liver. And so two things that float in the ocean is air and oil. Bony fish use air to regulate how they float, but sharks use oil in their liver. The other thing that makes a shark is that compared to a ray, all sharks have gills on the side of their head, whereas all rays have gills on the underside of their head. So if someone ever says they saw a shovel-nosed shark, you can tell them that actually, no, that's not true. There's a shovel-nosed ray. And if they say, how do you know that? And you say, well, this guy with a blue jumper on in this lesson told me that gills on the side of the head is a shark, gills on the underside of the head is a ray.
Interesting. I also learned something new there. Thank you, Adrian. Next question is, how do you tell the age of a shark? That is a really good question. How do you tell the age of a shark?
Yes, there are a couple of ways, and I actually did this for my PhD as well. So it was on that same animal, but I won't hold it up as a prop again. So one of the ways is you need to dissect them, and when you do that, they have a vertebrae like any other vertebrate animal, like you and I do. And what the vertebrae are is they're sort of round, and when you cut those in half, you can see bands like you see on the inside of a tree. So if you cut a tree and you have the bands of a tree going outwards, when you cut shark vertebrae in half, you see something very similar. And then if you count those bands, each of those bands represents 1 year of that shark's life. The other way you can do it is with some sharks have a spine on their fin. And again, you have to cut that spine off and cut it in half, and that will give you the same thing. There's a couple of ways that people are trying to work out how to age a shark without having to dissect them. So things like whale sharks, they think the patterns might change over time, and people are working out if that is a way to validate their age. But yeah, the only way you can tell a shark historically, and one of the more fundamental ways, is to dissect them and count the number of bands on their vertebrae.
Fantastic. And this is the final question that we've got for you, Adrian. Thank you so much, because it's been so informative. And I hope that we've tried to get through as many questions as we can. We've got a lot of questions. But yeah, thank you so much, Adrian. And this is the final question. Are sharks secretly dinosaurs? Interesting question.
Yeah, well, they've been around for pretty much the same time, about 200 million years. I'm not sure if they keep it a secret, though. It's just no one really asked them about it. But yeah, so they're one of these animals that, in terms of evolution over time, they really haven't changed. So when they first kind of started to appear in the fossil record, they were 200 million years ahead of their time. So yeah, just an unbelievable group of animals. They regulate the food webs in which they live. They're top predators mostly, but they still have an amazing diversity. You have whale sharks that eat plankton. You have those, the small sharks that only get to kind of less than a meter. And I guess the one thing I'll say about sharks, I get asked a lot, how many dangerous sharks are there out there? There's probably only about 5 or 6 species globally that are commonly involved in interactions with humans. And, there's 700 other species, and they don't get a mention. And most of them are incredible animals. They do, their thing right from the surface of the water to the deepest parts of the ocean. And yeah, they're just, well, I'm biased because obviously I love them, but yeah, they're one of the most fascinating animals I've ever encountered for sure. And if anyone ever gets a chance to swim with one or see one, then consider yourself very lucky.
Thank you so much, Adrian. And yeah, I've learned a lot, and hopefully people have learned a lot from some of those questions just now. And yeah, just one final, have you got any final closing comments about sharks? So anything that you think people would need to know or you'd like to say about sharks before we move on from this bit?
Yeah, one thing would be lots of sharks are, well, the way that sharks actually differ from bony fish as well is that, and this goes back to that question about what is a shark, they give birth to, well, most of them give birth to live young. They grow very slowly, and they also mature very late. So they're incredibly susceptible to overfishing. And lots of species of shark are actually threatened with extinction. And most of the sharks that you catch, like things like tiger sharks and things you get in fisheries, globally, most of those species are in decline. So it's a really important thing that when sharks are involved in fisheries, that they're released and kept alive. And they're just one of those animals that, we need in our oceans. They keep everything in balance. And yeah, they're just amazing.
Thank you so much, Adrian. It's been a pleasure hearing from you. And yeah, I hope that everyone who's been listening has learned something new today about sharks, but also in general about overfishing, about bycatch, about how we need to make sure that our ocean and the oceans around the world are teeming with life for as long as possible, and how we can do that sustainably. And hopefully over National Science Week, and even in science in general, and some of your other subjects that you learn about ecosystems that you can have a little think about what we've learned today and about how you can apply that to your everyday life. And just thinking a little bit about when you go to the ocean, and you see pictures of the ocean, just knowing that absolute interconnectivity that we have between us and the ocean, and knowing how important it is to remember about looking after life, the life beneath the waves. So I'd like to introduce you now to Alexis, who is going to have a little talk to you about Saltwater School Awards and how your school can get involved and win some prizes. So thank you, Alexis.
Thank you, Mark, and hi, everyone. We're so thrilled that you could join us for today's session. It's been really fun and we've learned a lot, so thank you all for that. Before we wrap up, I'd like to share with you a couple of opportunities that we have as part of this launch event for National Science Week. So firstly is our Saltwater Schools Awards program. If you head over to our website, www.msc.org/saltwaterschools, and click on Become a Saltwater School, you'll find some information on our awards programs. So basically we've created 3 types of awards. We've got the Communication Award, the Action Award, and the Inspire Award. And these are open for both students and teachers to apply on behalf of their school. And it's something that you can use to communicate your school's commitment to ocean protection, ocean education, and taking action to help conserve our oceans. The application process is very simple, and the awards have different criteria. So the first award, the Communication Award, simply involves joining our Saltwater Schools network. That means just signing up as a teacher to receive our quarterly emails and teaching one class using one of the MSC classroom resources that we've just launched. So have a look at that. That's the first award that you can apply for. It's very simple. And then the Action and Inspire Awards will suggest some different practical activities that you or students, classes, whole schools can take to receive an award. This awards program has been created to help you feel a sense of pride in your activities and to gain recognition on behalf of your schools. So we hope you'll have a look at what the activities are, what resources we have to offer, and consider applying for an award. The second offer we have for you today is a quiz competition to test what you've learned today from the virtual classroom. So we're hosting a Kahoot challenge via our website also, which is open from 12:30 today until 10 p.m. on Friday night. It's a short quiz for students or class groups to take based on the lesson today. And if you get all the answers correct, you will go in the running to win an annual subscription of 10 copies of the National Geographic Kids magazine for your school. So just a note, when you're applying on this, you'll see on the slide there, we'd like you to apply under the name of your school. Don't apply as a student name or as a teacher name or email address, just apply as your school's name. And that way we'll know who to contact when we're selecting the winner from the prize draw. That brings us to the end of our session today. Thank you again for joining us. We've been really thrilled by your support and all the enthusiasm for voting on the Mentimeter and sending us all your sharp questions. We encourage you to use and explore the new resources, and the lesson plans will soon be available for teachers in editable Word doc format as well. And please share your feedback with us from today's session so that we can continue building and improving our offering to all of you schools. Thank you to Nicola, to Laura, Mr. Dunn and Adrian for your amazing presentation today. And I hope you all enjoy your lunch breaks. See you later. Bye.